This brings us to our regulatory panel section. So the format of this will be a brief 5 to 10 minute presentation by each panelist, and we'll go to panel discussions, which is more of a free form introduction. So Christina's up first, my former colleague at Ofcom, and Director of Spectrum Policy and Analysis. Cristina, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Cristina Data, Ofcom, Office of Communication in the UK, working in Spectrum Group and having the sort of pleasure to talk this afternoon about the answer of all the problems, sharing. So I've put it on the first slide without even going there. But clearly for us, sharing is not only the buzzword, is what we try to achieve to deliver innovation and growth. And Martin has just provided an example with the DME band of how we look, and we take sharing seriously anytime that we're trying to enable new uses. A little bit of an agenda here. So our role in enabling wireless growth, and then I'm going to take you through 3 examples. The future of the upper 6 gigahertz band, the roadmap to 6G, and I have to say, I'm now thinking, why did I write 6G? I should have in the slides, actually, it's beyond 5G, because what is 6G? I'm not sure we know. And then a little bit of an update on local spectrum. Rather than awards, I may talk a little bit about our millimeter wave award, but also the review of band 77 that were carried out between last year and this year to enable vertical networks, to enable private networks and other use cases. So I think many of you have seen this slide in the past, is what we use as a context. So we have a duty to secure optimal use of a radio spectrum, but at the same time, we want to make sure that people and businesses have a connectivity where and when they need it. So being people, individuals, cities, rural areas, but also industry, robots also need connectivity, wireless connectivity. So again, we want to make sure that that type of wireless broadband connectivity is provided. But at the same time, there is a plethora of other use cases, from meteorological application, satellite and space application that we're seeing a massive growth on, and are sort of covering a lot of the future WRC agenda, to all of the other use cases, Wi-Fi, GPS, etc., TV, radio, PMSC. Everything is important. So our work is becoming, and I'm sure my colleagues from other regulators experience the same, it's becoming more and more interesting as we're trying to make sure that every use case can grow and innovate. Every sector can innovate and actually can enable more use of wireless. So to do that, the spectrum management approach has to evolve. We have published our spectrum strategy for the next decade in 2021, with sharing as the first pillar of a strategy. Sharing by default approach is what we need to move towards. Going into the examples, I wanted to start with the upper 6 gigahertz, because upper 6 is one of the bands that I think at the last WRC, at Mobile World Congress every year, is a band where there is a huge interest from both community, the Wi-Fi community and the mobile community. What we're trying to achieve, what we believe will deliver the greatest benefit, is actually an hybrid approach in the band that enable both Wi-Fi and mobile. And we have been working internationally. We have been working at the CPT ECC level to sort of explore potential option of an indoor-outdoor, and of a high density area versus low density area, a dynamic spectrum split, different type of approaches. But we strongly believe that if we can enable both a Wi-Fi use and a mobile use in this band, both, well, consumers will benefit, yes, because I want to be able to connect indoor, mostly to Wi-Fi, outdoor, mostly to mobile. How can we make that happen? So for us, this is an open debate. We have run events. We have published updates document on it, just because we're trying to push the dial towards something that we see more and more as the future, also for mobile. Mobile may need to share. Why mobile may need to share? Because there is a world potentially beyond 5G, not calling it 6G on purpose, where sharing native solutions are needed to maximize spectrum supply. Now, First and foremost, I think I put a candidate for 6G sharing question mark with the bands, because do we need a new spectrum for 6G? Possibly. Do we need more spectrum for capacity purposes? It might be the case. Do we need it nationwide? Maybe not. There are certainly areas where there is a high demand for capacity, because where people concentrate. There might be other areas where this is not needed. So again, we're looking at bands here, the bands that were identified at the last WRC, that all have got a difficult environment, let's be honest. Therefore, sharing must be the starting point. It needs to be a sharing by design, particularly as we're talking about no more greenfield spectrum and potentially moving away from this wide area nationwide deployment and more towards a model that to an extreme is what we're now doing with millimeter wave, which is a high density area. Let's award the spectrum in the high density area where we believe it's going to be deployed for wireless broadband solutions. So again, moving the dial, trying to make sure that sharing becomes the default solution for several different types of services. And last but not least, I wanted to touch as well on the 38242 gigahertz band. So in this band, we took a little bit of a bet when we started our work and we opened it up in 2019, because we wanted to say, okay, we got a band where there is a mobile ecosystem. We were seeing a beginning of a sort of noise around demand for private network within a mobile ecosystem. So let's try and open not only 38242, but other bands. So we've opened up 1800, 2.3, and 26 to sort of say, let's see if there is demand. We were a little bit conservative. We totally acknowledge that, because we didn't know what level of demand we would have seen. And demand has emerged across the UK. These are the licenses that we're seeing right now, mostly in the 1800 and in the 38242 at different power levels, because again, we try to play with different powers, medium power and low power, and with a mix of use cases, but mostly dominated by FWA. So a lot of FWA solutions that are provided rural broadband in areas where fiber was not yet there, but also neutral host solution, and quite a few, I would say, private networks as well, factories, ports in particular have been quite interesting sort of solution that we have enabled in the UK. So we've done our review. We started last year, this review, exactly because we wanted to wait a little bit to see, okay, now we're understanding a little bit more what type of demand is out there. We understand a little bit more what are the challenges that users are facing with regard to our access. And we wanted to see, okay, can we be a little bit less conservative in the way in which we make this spectrum available, whilst supporting innovation and growth. So we have actually increased the spectrum supply in the most popular band at 38242, because we've introduced more flexible sharing rule. So more spectrum is becoming available, and it's quite unbelievable how much supply can increase, but simply taking into account the fact that, well, yeah, if we assume synchronization between users, all of a sudden the sterilization that you need to introduce shrinks significantly, so you can pack more people in. We've liberalized some of our rules. For example, we have removed the terminal registration for low power indoor to allow more neutral host type of models to use this band. And also we have provided more power and capacity, reducing the user deployment cost by lifting up a little bit, increasing a little bit the low power license. And then we've also been consulting. So we've done published in the summer, in July, something that was a decision on, so what we call a statement on the first two areas, but also we were consulting on wider access to medium power, because again, we've listened to stakeholders out there. They wanted more medium power options without having to go through what we called an exception process. So we've looked at that and we've consulted on that proposal to actually see, can we offer more medium power solution. So again, all of this in this critical band 38242 to enable greater use, to enable more people to innovate, and to increase that spectrum supply. That is so critical for anyone who wants to share spectrum. And this is all in a way in line to where I started. How do we enable innovation and growth in the UK is actually by enabling more spectrum sharing across different services, but can very often coordinate between each other as well. So this is my final slide, and I will be very happy to take questions. I don't know, I think later. Yeah.
Final question. So let me just, thanks, Cristina. You had, the chance of going first. So, so for the rest, I think Charles, you already had a presentation. You don't have any presentation. You don't have. So please just take max 8-10 minutes so that we can actually have a discussion. So Alexander, James, and then Laura. So and then
okay,
going to the panel discussion. So
for
sorry,
sure.
Alexander.
No. That's absolutely fine. It won't take longer than 8 minutes, but hopefully less. Okay. The starting point is global perspectives on sharing, vision or reality. Maybe to say first thing, it is not that sharing is something which we do not have right now. Sharing is already everywhere. It depends on the perspective. If you look in the tiny band, 450 to 470, we have already a couple of users in there. If you look at 8 megahertz channel in the 470 694, you may have only one user in there. So there is no sharing. If you look on a broader scale, and I said it already, then later on, and if you see Charles' nice overview of the spectrum between 9 kilohertz and 3 terahertz, we share the spectrum already with everybody. But the question is there really about the perspective and our way forward. So exclusive rights are always going with expensive fees. Obviously, the users would like to pay less. And therefore, sharing is definitely the way to really adapt and make the most beneficial use for the society out of the spectrum. And Cristina said it already, and that's also the German perspective from the regulator. We would like to really make it available for everybody and for all opportunities. We would like to open up new opportunities in a certain way. Of course, we see that there is a high dynamic. Everybody said already, oh, spectrum is a scarce resource. Yes, it was already from the beginning. We started in a very low way, and it has always been added due to the technological development, and we are now within the terahertz field or sub-terahertz field, and everybody is thinking about the economic feasibility of that one. And maybe it's not economically feasible right now, but it will be in the future. So therefore, even then, I expect that we still have the discussion about scarcity, and there will be people saying we need more. What do we expect from the user perspective regarding sharing? Everybody who is already a user demands, yeah, well, I would like to have stable, predictable, and certainty in my usage, also to deliver the quality I would like to present to my consumers. Understandable. I would like to have clean spectrum, fine as well. But where do we have the most sharing experience? Maybe in our Wi-Fi band 2.4. A lot of companies producing equipment from that one because the consumer doesn't expect that quality of service at a certain point in time. And then Wi-Fi grew up and we needed more spectrum for them as well. And now we are discussing something like we need exclusive spectrum for Wi-Fi in 6 gigahertz. Well, from the regulatory perspective, maybe not the right way forward. And therefore, Cristina is right to say, and the German regulator is also thinking about how can we share this and make this available. We see on the other side, maybe then also the quality of service from the mobile community, where the consumer expects some kind of quality. We cannot accept being somewhere in the underground and, oh, my mobile connection is bad or worse, or I have no connectivity on my voice calls. That is something which is annoying, and the consumer expects that this quality must be there. So some certainty must be balanced all the time. And that is something where we say, okay, this is then the overall efficient use of spectrum, and the regulator has to ensure exactly that. How to do this? Well, we have already made some experience in that one. It is very easy to share when we have planned bands, like for the UHF. We know where the radio stations are, on which channel, and where we have the white spaces. So that could be easily channeled. and then we can work on that one. It is also easy in bands where we know we have a declining use. That's the green field we used before. We saw the military is moving out, so therefore somebody else can move in. For example, that was the opening up of the mobile community in 900. We do not have those easy cases anymore. If you want to have those easy cases, you have to move up into the spectrum. 10 gigahertz plus, which is technologically challenging. We have medium complexity in bands where we have similar technology, maybe 5G, but with different applications. One example of that one is 1800 already, where you have maybe something for the future of railway communication on one hand, and on the other side, the mobile community. And they need to find ways and means how to adapt to each other, even if they both use 5G technology. And that was the point we made before on the wireless microphones. And we have then high complexity. We have bands with different technology, satellite, mobile, or even radar, or the passive bands are the most challenging on that one. How we can ensure that we really get our baseline research and development and ensure that and use the spectrum more efficiently. I put a very tiny sentence there. Harmonization enables sharing, because that is something where we can really work together, make more efficient use, and then look for the right way forward. Therefore, I'm very happy that the WSC last year for the 6 gigahertz band said, okay, we open up the band for IMT for mobile. It is already available for mobile, but have a look how you share this in between your country. And therefore, we are moving towards a harmonized approach also in Europe on that. What we need to do, and that's also our one, if you would like to share something which is already there and protect them, you need to do experiments and trials. And they are proportionate to the complexity. The longer you stay there and the more you have to protect, the more complex those studies could find. And we need to have fact-finding and realistic characteristics. If you would like to share then satellite with terrestrial services, you definitely need to have the clear answer on that one. And we are working in that direction as well. Overall, and that's the conclusion, is we need to have a trustworthy process where everybody is sitting together. And there are a lot of engineers in the room. They usually find a solution. I'm very certain. But we need to have then really some kind of trust into each other, that everybody is keen to find the technical solution which is available for share. So that is something for our example on the UHF case. What we do right now is we need to find maybe some white space channels for our military. What we've done so far is done the simulations and assumptions. We thought, okay, there is an empty channel, and even PMSE will not be hampered by the usage because we limit it to certain geographic areas where no PMSE is there. Then we did some technical validation measurements on that one, if we are really certain of that one. So step by step, and now we are moving towards the experimental licenses in order to say, okay, those channels may be used. This is done in the 500 megahertz band in order to find it out. And we spoke with our military as well, and they are very happy to work together with the cultural industry for events, theaters, whatever, in order to find out, okay, if there is something and you have a certain event on the weekend, I'm quite certain there will be no maneuver. So therefore, there is no issue. And if there is something, the experimental licenses will show it, and then we can move forward. And in the end, we will see maybe in 2025, the first licenses of that one. That will provide stability and also a trustworthy process towards everybody who's included, the new user and also the incumbent one. If this is something for the future as well, let's see, maybe we can skip one of those points and steps forward in the future. Next one is 3842. We see low and medium power limits in there, which is already providing for us some good things. We have the safe harbor for the satellite, and let's see if we can make also use for some of our private and local networks in a harmonized way forward. So 3738 is already the band for campus, so-called campus networks in Germany, but I heard already interest from some licensees that they would like to move up in the harmonized bands as well, because the equipment will be cheaper. That's very easy. Sharing with satellite is definitely a prerequisite in that band. That's for sure, because we said it's a safe harbor, even if we do not have many C-band usage in Europe any longer, but we still have satellite gateways in the C-band, and those needs to be protected. And in the adjacent band, we have still the aeronautical mobile. And Emmanuel, if you would like to answer questions to that point, please go ahead. I'm quite certain that will be definitely sorted out as well. And it looks quite promising that this band will be made available in a harmonized way forward. What we do is we are studying right now to make use of the experience in the UK on that one, and maybe find some automated assignment proceedings in that one to make it more easier accessible for the public and the consumers to use that band. And then let's see. So the next one is then the upper 6 GHz band. I said already there we need to have definitely clear usage conditions for everybody. We have the mandate within CPT. We try to find really a good balanced way forward. Personal remark from my side, a priority usage which is maybe a little bit demand oriented could be a good way forward to say that we have some certain Wi-Fi usage in the band as well, with maybe 2 320 megahertz channels available, and also the possibility of further development towards a 6G environment. But one remark from my side regarding 6G, and I said it already since 2020, 6G will be an evolution, not a revolution. And therefore, we will see also that the investment must be there. We will see the stability, and then we will move forward to 6G. So therefore, even if there is something on 2028, 2030 for the first introduction, it will not be a big, huge step towards 6G like we've seen for 5G so far. There will be something in between, a gradual improvement of the networks due to the heavy investments which we expect. And that's it for my remarks. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to discuss in the panel.
Yep. Yeah, let's see if we can stick to 10 minutes, Max.
Over to you, Laura.
It's me.
It is you.
Okay.
So it's getting better and better.
Gonna be really, really fast. Do you want to use this?
Spacebar.
Yeah. So before I go into my slide deck, what I promise is going to be really, really quick. My name is Laura. I'm head of innovation and spectrum policy at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, quite a long name. Before that, I was colleague of both Martin and Cristina in Ofcom. Because it's easy to recognize Cristina and I, because it's usually the only women in the room talking about spectrum. I'm going to tell a little bit about what my role kind of looks into when it comes to innovation and why sharing is important to it. Before that, I have a little bit of some slides to talk about the department itself. DSIT was established just a few years ago as a kind of conglomerate between several other former departments. And what our kind of focus in is to look into kind of try to accelerate innovation within the country, ensure that both new and existing technologies can kind of safely be developed, and that it kind of accelerates the growth in the country. And also kind of driving forward some modern data government. And I think kind of that goes beyond what the science remit is, but pretty much for everyone that can have like a successful experience as and when you deal with the government. Just a quick intro to our ministers. Our Secretary of State is Peter Carl. We have Chris Brand as Minister of State for Digital Infrastructure, which the spectrum team falls into. But this remit is incredibly wide, and it goes from metamaterials, artificial intelligence to spectrum. So we have other senior people kind of overlooking the work so far. And the way we are set up is if you look at the sort of the department, you have a conglomerate looking at digital infrastructure that not only covers the spectrum, but also fixed networks, etc., even satellite. And within that, we have the wireless and consumer team, including the spectrum. And within that very, very small remit, you have the spectrum team. Our overall duty is kind of keeping the legal framework for spectrum management on the review, noting that obviously the Ofcom is the independent regulator, so whoever makes the final decision on how it's managed is by them. But we do set a strategic direction to Ofcom in performing their duties, and we plan as a renewal from the from this year's government. We plan to share a statement of strategic priorities soon. And we also, lastly but not least, we are leading kind of like cross-government policy decisions with other users of the spectrum, which with time, they only, but increase. You have the UK Space Agency, you have the Ministry of Defence. Lastly, we have DSNES looking at networks for the utility in the future. So if anything, we're getting busier with time. And now what matters? Why is this the spectrum sharing goes to kind of the core of what we think should be our kind of strategic vision for spectrum in the future? Well, these two documents that you see on screen, this wireless infrastructure strategy and the spectrum statement, both these were published under the former government, but this pretty much goes to our core of what we think a strategy needs to be. And to kind of resonate with what the former panel members have said so far, I think it's undoubtable that sharing will be in some way capacity, and sharing will have many different meanings, will be core to spectrum management. And that means that you can be in intra-user between different users. So we need to be ready in the way we do it. Just a couple of examples. We initiated a bit of thinking about what could be done in the mid-bands to kind of open up for different use, particularly for private networks. And we really welcomed Ofcom's work and the shared access framework that opened a few years ago. I think some people in the room know already quite successful it's been. We also kind of really welcome Ofcom's review lastly on the framework about. I think it's kind of like a step in the right direction. Probably it's kind of looking at making more spectrum available in terms of volume, but a few questions I think can still need to be answered in terms of how do you make that spectrum available either faster or for users that may not necessarily need the spectrum for months. The other example I'm going to talk about a little is our spectrum sandboxes, with again in conjunction with Ofcom. We were close together very well. The idea was, and going back to giving you a bit of context of what these sandboxes are, when DSIT was formed, we got a little bit of money and funding to do sandboxes in very different areas, and we managed to get a few millions to do a bit of work on spectrum sharing. It's a one-year project, although, and albeit subject to whatever comes in the discussions on the budget only from yesterday, our commitment is to keep on the momentum on this kind of field trials and studies. These years, because of kind of the context on where spectrum policy decisions were made, etc., the two main areas of work of these sandboxes are kind of focusing on the N77 band and upper 6 gigahertz, and from the lens of hybrid sharing. We expect this work to continue to conclude by March 25. But yet again, I would see this kind of as an example, as a prototype of the type of work us from government would like to carry on doing, because we think this kind of pivotal to keep on testing and seeing how things actually do share in reality, so we can develop also our policy making and our regulation in a way that's fit for purpose. So lastly, if I were to just choose one line about what our vision is or strategic vision for spectrum management, would be that spectrum should be an enabler to innovation as opposed to a barrier. And that would go from absolutely anybody that requires spectrum for their applications. And just to reiterate our commitment to both collaboration with industry, with Ofcom, and whoever wants to actually do a bit of work on how a spectrum can actually reach anywhere. And that's me.
Thank you, Alan. And last but by no means least is James Young. So you might have seen Ian Taft on the agenda, but Ian was unavoidably detained today. So
the younger, better looking version.
James is the younger, better looking version. So thanks very much for stepping in, James. It's space bar talk.
I should say, for those of you that don't know me, my background is 10 years in DSIT's predecessor, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, where I did spectrum policy, and for the last 5 years I've been in MOD doing spectrum policy, where I am also a spectrum innovation person. So these are not my slides, so I will deviate somewhat from the standard spiel. We find, particularly with the military, that our spectrum environment is, we actually have another one, I can't remember what the 4th C is that we have to talk about it is, but the environment we operate in is congested because of our own use, contested by our opponents, competed also because at WRC we find that certain nations do certain things that they propose largely to disadvantage our military and advantage their military. So we have this sort of environment that we operate in. It's complicated. There's an important mantra that we have in defence, which is you train your military as you fight. And that is really, really important, because if your soldiers, sailors, airmen are not trained as they fight, when they actually, I mean, if you have things like war mode, where you have different frequencies when you're training, and then you switch a toggle, and then you have a wider range of frequencies when you go to war, it doesn't work very well, because the soldiers, sailors and airmen are not trained to use that full range of frequencies. They have to remember under an intense pressure environment that they need to switch over. So ideally, you want your military to be trained to operate in a wide range of frequencies. Now, you're all, well, not everybody in the room is familiar with the UK frequency allocation table. The really important message from this slide, I mean, the reason it's here is it's obviously complicated. Where it says 80 to 90% of military bands are shared, we've actually checked it recently, and it's about 85% of the bands that we have access to, we actually share with somebody else. And when we share with somebody else, it's either another government department for another government service, or it might be a civilian user we share with, or it might, you know, mobile industry, all sorts of things. So the military is no stranger to sharing. And I personally think we're an ideal person to share with PMSE. Oh, I forgot to mention, when I was talking about having worked at DCMS before, I was the person that got PMSE the £35 million in 2008-9 for. Duncan said thank you now. It's been a long time coming, but yeah, I went into bat for it. I put the recommendation that we spent more money to get you.
There's a cold beer in the fridge.
Just for you.
That's really nice, but unfortunately I don't drink. So, what's this slide about? The important things that have happened for the military in spectrum terms in recent years is we had the public sector spectrum release program, which ran from 2010 to 2022, not 2023.
Yeah.
I'm sure I told Ian this when he was doing the slides, but he doesn't always listen to me. And the target was actually, the stretch target was 750 megahertz to be shared or made available to new users. We got to 687, so we got quite close to the stretch target as well. But almost all that spectrum came from military bands. So that has affected us in quite some ways. And now we have, going after that, we have the public sector spectrum access program, which is a business as usual activity, but it doesn't have a target on it. So basically what it means is all bands are up for play, which is not really great from the military point of view. And when you come back to my train as we fight mantra thing, the military needs access to a lot of spectrum. We do have a lot of spectrum. We don't use it all the time, that's fair to say. So we are an ideal person to share with, but we need to have access to all the spectrum almost. Right, structure. This is not important. I don't even know why this slide is in here, but the only important thing is we have our team, which is this team here, which is the spectrum policy team, which we have, that's me. We have this team, which is the Defence Electromagnetic Authority, which is our team down in Blandford, which is our equivalent of Ofcom. They issue authorities to radiate, which are very much like licenses, but not licenses. Don't tell anyone they're licenses. And they would allow military users to use spectrum. And if they don't have an authority to radiate, they're not allowed to. And generally, the military guys tend to be quite good about doing what they're told because they're trained to do that. But it's just showing that we have a slightly disjointed structure. We all report into the Defence Chief Information Officer, but we report through different structures. But we are a virtual team. We work very closely with our Blandford people. Ooh, wrong key. Oh, can I go back? Arrow, yes, I can. It's important to talk about the relationship we have with Ofcom, because this has been actually a really big plus in recent years. We are working, I mean, I know everybody says this, but we are actually working in very close partnership. We have 3 Ofcom secondees into our team because we are a very small team and we need more resource in the team. These Ofcom secondees are vetted. They have full access to everything in MOD. They have access to our secret systems, so I mean, they are properly cleared. This gives us a lot of ability to share with Ofcom details that we couldn't share before, so we can share them classified information. So when Ofcom asks us a question about what you're doing in a particular band, they can get real information, and they can have confidence when their secondees into our team say they're doing lots of stuff in that band. They can be confident that they're being told the truth. Now, this is a real plus for the relationship between Ofcom, because it means that they listen to us when we say things, and we have people translating Ofcom speak, military speak, and vice versa. And there are different languages. Trust me, it took me about 5 years to get a clue what people in MOD are saying. So talking the same language is important. 3 secondees we've got. The Public Sector Spectrum Access Programme I've mentioned already. Future sharing with MOD, right? This is quite important. This is actually the more relevant slide. DSIT's autumn statement. I should say also, I wrote the spectrum strategy for the government in 2024. I was a co-author. I didn't write it all. Sorry, 2024, 2014. What am I talking about? We are looking at ways we can share. That's my job, is looking for ways we can share with new uses. As I said, we already share 85%. Theoretically, we could share all our spectrum. And we could share more of that 85% where we share with somebody. We could probably share with more than one user, as long as it's done in the right way. What we have been working on recently, and I personally been working on with our Ofcom secondee, is a revised spectrum sharing framework for defence spectrum. Now, this is quite important because the issue, as I said, having worked for DCS, I see the government push to make spectrum available, and I've experienced that, and I see the need for that. But having worked for MOD, on the other side of the argument, I see the need to protect military access. So I think I'm well placed to see the need to balance these things. The important thing from the framework is that the framework needs to give confidence to both sides of a sharing arrangement as to what terms they are sharing the spectrum under. So the civil user, or mainly civil user we are sharing with, needs to know where, when, what sort of powers they can do, what sort of interference or MOD use they might be subject to, and what terms they could lose that spectrum in. So, you know, how many years notice they would be given if the terms of the agreement would change. And from the MOD perspective, we need to know what activity we're allowed to do in that spectrum, how many days or a year we're allowed to use that spectrum, or what times of day we're allowed to use that spectrum. And also, if something changes, and things do change, how do we get that spectrum back? How much notice do we need to give? The reason I talk about getting spectrum back is people are very paranoid about giving up access to spectrum because it potentially affects military capability, and that's obviously something nobody ever wants to do. But we've also seen in the conflict in Ukraine that spectrum usage in the military has changed very quickly in a big way. More drones than ever before have been deployed. I found that the Russian forces in Ukraine are using a very wide range of frequencies to control their drones. Somebody said to me between 200 megahertz and 1200 megahertz. I'm sure that's not the only frequencies, but whole gigahertz of spectrum is potentially in play. So that means we need to be having access to that kind of level of spectrum, and this is obviously low frequency spectrum. We need to have access to that to be able to check our own capabilities, to train our forces to be able to use that. So that means the spectrum sharing we're talking about isn't just sharing from MOD to civil users. It also goes the other way, and this is what we think we've got right in the new framework, is that it it explains how we would get access to civilian bands, because that's important for us. This, yes, not an ideal slide. We do have a National Spectrum Centre in the UK that's recently been set up. It has a role to be, it was envisaged to be a place where we could try things, we could do, I hate to use the word sandbox, but we could test things. Originally, that was one of the concepts they were talking about, was somewhere in the middle of nowhere that they could test access to spectrum and people could go there and do things that maybe Ofcom wouldn't let them do in normal locations. But it's also been set up at the University of Aberystwyth, and it's also been looking at how we might get more spectrum engineers in the world. So they were talking about having an MSc in radio spectrum engineering. It's fair to say that it's not been a success in that aspect. What we are finding is mainly middle-aged men. Thank you. I'm glad we've got some women. We do have women in our team as well, which is good to say. But we're having middle-aged men. And I say middle-aged men, it means old men we're suffering with. And there's a real danger that we are not going to have sufficient people who understand spectrum coming through in the future. I recently did a degree in telecoms engineering, and I found that the course was shutting down where I was due to lack of students. The only way they thought they could keep the course open was they thought they could bring in 30 or 40 students from China. China seems to be about the only country that seems to be encouraging RF engineering. So we need to be doing more on that. NSC are also working with us. They're looking at the idea of offering some training courses on spectrum, some awareness courses. We think that would be useful for us and government as policymakers to understand spectrum more, because there's that shortage. Ian's highlighted young people are looking for degree apprenticeships. They don't want to incur large debts. I wouldn't have done a degree if I had to pay for it. I got my employer to pay for it. That's the way to do it. And he's talked about not just government could leverage this NSC course, but industry could as well. So the idea being that it could be open to more. Now, there should be one more slide, and I think Ian has missed the most important slide. This is the slide that I've used on a few presentations, and it would have, I'll draw it for you mentally. You have to imagine it. So over here, you have a ship, HMS Sheffield, sunk in the Falklands War. Important to know, it was sunk because there was an interference problem between one of the radar systems and one of the ship's comm systems. This highlights to me the need for people to be trained in how all the equipment works and the environments they are going to be operating in. So HMS Sheffield sunk, I think, partly related to spectrum reasons. And on the other side, you have to imagine a very gorgeous chocolate Burmese cat wearing sunglasses. Now that represents, that's my cat, by the way, represents the mobile industry, who want you to be able to download more and more videos of fluffy cats to your phone during the day. Now, there is a limit to how many videos you can watch in a day. I had to say fluffy cats, otherwise I get in trouble if people say I talk about adult material to their friends. It's basically a balance. It's like the classic balance between economic prosperity, national security. You could have the scales, but having a cat and a warship is much more interesting. You have to balance that need. What is important to you? More spectrum for mobile and all these services, national security. I think it's a balance that can be made by enabling sharing, but it has to be done in such a way that defence has access to the spectrum when it needs it. We don't need it all the time. We just need people who can share with us and understand those restrictions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone. So let me just say a few words just to introduce this panel. That's what I was supposed to do at the beginning, but didn't get a chance to do that. So I'm the head of the Spectrum and Regulatory Affairs team for Shure. And I'm here today, to moderate this panel as the Chief Regulatory Officer of the WIN Forum. So we had a session, similar summit in Reston, Virginia, I think in June or July. And people based in US attended in person, and then we have a few folks from Europe, like Alexander Kühn. We had Martin Fenton from Ofcom, and also I think from ANFR, Eric Fournier. And, we had some good discussions, but everyone was virtual. I was the only one sitting in the room there. And it looks like people wanted to continue that conversation. So we said, why don't we have a summit here, and people from the US now, can dial in and hopefully participate virtually. So thank you for accepting to be here. So just a few words about myself. I've been doing spectrum management for 27 years. Was in the mobile industry before moving to Shure in 2021. So I think I know a lot of people in this room. Happy to be here. So let's get started with a panel. Let me start with Charles, since he flew from the US. Let's start with him. So I think last week or the week before, there was a suggestion, I think by AT&T, to move CBRS from a 3.55 to 3.1 gigahertz band. One of the bands being studied in the National Spectrum Strategy. Any thoughts or views on that?
So that was a public blog issued by AT&T. There was no submission to either the FCC or NTIA on this. That was just I think a thought put out forth by one of the U.S. wireless carriers. It started a lot of conversation. I would say that. I certainly understand. I think from a technical perspective, and particularly the equipment, the desire by some entities to increase the power levels of CBRS, because on either side of them you have high-powered, mostly exclusive use, and then you have starting to use dBs, but a lot of dBs down for that CBRS. So understand for the equipment manufacturers, that's very hard to kind of develop one power amplifier to provide the service. So, but nevertheless, CBRS was developed in mind with from the FCC's perspective to have a relatively low power level, because it was serving fairly small geographic areas. In the United States, these are called counties. In the hierarchy, you have, of course, the U.S., you have states, and then within the states, you have counties. So those are how those are assigned. I think that if you consider this, it could start some discussion about maybe how we ultimately maybe fine tune the 3 gigahertz band, right? There was a discussion, about looking above, closer to the radio altimeter band at 4.2. So I suspect those discussions will continue in the coming years. Probably require a brand new set of radio altimeters for the thousands of aircraft that are out there, right? But I think maybe to get the discussion going early, as RTCA, the body that develops those standards, is working on that. I think that could be helpful. So I would kind of look at it from the holistic, not only for the US, but worldwide, the 3 gigahertz band.
Okay. So just a follow-up question, I guess, for the rest of the panelists. So CBRS band, as you've heard, has been successful, based on the inputs we got from Charles, and also tomorrow we're going to hear from PJ about CBRS deployments. Forget about the complexity related to CBRS, correct? It's used by the DoD, Navy radars, and then you have 3 tiers. If you, remove some of the complexity there, is there anything the CBRS that could be attractive for UK, Germany, or France? Like just a database approach, and maybe the messages that you have between like a spectrum access system and then the network. Is that something that Ofcom, DSIT, MOD, BNetzA, and ANFR would consider doing down the road?
I can comment on this. Honestly, we do not investigate CBRS. Maybe because I guess the complexity of CBRS is there because of the problem which is to be overcome. And we in this range we have the 3.5 gigahertz band in Europe, which is 400 megahertz chunk of spectrum which is available. That's why it is never. I don't think it's that much popular for the national discussion. But I would rather refer to the example of the AFC system in the 6 gigahertz range. Yeah. On this, we have supported the work item for investigation.
I'm not necessarily talking about the band itself, 3.5. I'm just talking about the concept of having a database, with information about an incumbent, but you can then, connect to, and based on that, you can then decide if this channel is available or not. Can that concept be exported to other bands? Not necessarily 3.5. I'm just talking about the concept in general. Please.
Yeah,
Maybe you're already doing that.
No, I'm a big fan of dynamic spectrum
Okay.
access in all sorts of ways, and I've pushed it ever since I joined MOD. However, I think that this is a solution that's not yet found its problem. As in, it's very good, it works, but it's perhaps early. I don't think we need it yet.
Okay.
Because I think there's an awful lot more we can do sharing wise with Ofcom without having to do this.
Okay.
But also there are geographic reasons why it might not work so well in UK or maybe France. Most of our country is coastline. So to do something like CBRS, we would have an awful lot of sensors given the size of country compared to the amount of that we would free up.
Yeah.
So I think the cost for that particular band is not great, but I think that we've looked at similar systems. For example, we were talking about sharing 2.3 gigahertz with mobile. We could have a system where when our aircraft takes off, it makes the spectrum unavailable. When the aircraft lands, it becomes available.
Yeah.
That's very doable, but I just think you don't need to spend the money on doing
Yeah,
it. when
and
you're a
not
better
necessarily
way to
even
do it.
sensing, like if you look at 3.8, 4.2,
Yeah.
for example, where you have earth stations, correct? Fixed satellite earth stations, not radars on board ships, or 3.7 to 3.8 gigahertz. Local licensing is essentially correct. Right now, my understanding is this a manual process, correct? When you apply for local license in 3.8 or 3.7, there's a lot of math or whatever analysis that goes behind, and then you get an answer maybe several weeks later whether you get a license or not. If the number of local licenses increase to a point where it just doesn't make sense to continue, can the process be automated and can then
So in the UK, we're already working on the automation.
Okay.
Part of our review is actually to automate the process. So when we started manual because we didn't know the demand, the size of the demand. But the idea is we have a database. We don't have a database that does the sensing of CBRS, because I agree with all my colleagues. That was a solution to a specific problem that existed in the US, where you had to know where the radars were on or off. We don't have a type of problem. So we will automate the process to make sure that actually it's a speedier use of the band. On the general concept of dynamic access, we also published a document a little bit 2 years ago, I think, and I agree with James. It's you need to find the problem for which that is the solution, because everyone wants to have a sort of a security of tenure, that the spectrum doesn't disappear the day after or the second after, because band. So we tried to sort of understand what was the problem in the market, and no one came forward saying, oh yes, okay, no, absolutely, I will be happy to lose access to my spectrum. And I think this is a little bit possibly why the CBRS works better for the priority access, but we have heard of the GIA users sort of sometimes feeling like, well, I cannot offer a service because there are too many. Yes. So all of a sudden, whilst you were trying to deliver a successful service, and you offered a service that works for everyone. And by the way, we have TV white spaces in the UK, which
I was going to ask about TV white space. I think Laura was involved in TV white space. That's what Martin told me. With Martin. So why do you think, like, TV white space essentially, stopped, in the UK?
So I think, and having been much part and now kind of taking a step back and having seen how the working hybrid for the secret heads, how AC is developing in the US, I think mainly is down to two market reasons and one technological, one kind of regulatory issue. First one is, well, there was no like an easy market for people to actually acquire equipment. So they needed an investment to develop some equipment that could use the band, and the security of tenure was feeble. So the business case was difficult. If I was the spectrum engineer going to the FCO and say, can you give me money to do this? Probably 1% would be yes. All the rest will say no, because you cannot show that next year you need to shut down the service. From the regulatory perspective, and I think there was a reason for it. And I think, I mean, for all our sins, I think TV West Spaces, and don't quote me on this, someone else said it, but I agree with this. It was a great example of like thinking outside the box. Yeah. Maybe it was a little bit ahead of its time, but I think other systems that have been developed elsewhere have definitely had some lessons learned from it. Definitely. And I think one of the reasons, sorry, just very quickly, one of the reasons, and I think that the regulators are quickly getting pace on that, is that they're kind of like the propagation characteristics and the modeling that was baked in the system was incredibly conservative. So in some areas would lead for like very few dBs to use. So again, it will kind of go back to the business case. Do I really want to spend millions on using what effectively was a Wi-Fi access point outside?
Alexander, 3.7, 3.8, maybe similar question as 3.8 to 4.2. Do you think at some point?
I take it back to UHF because CBRS is something which is having a stable situation with the database. So solution is fine, and as I said, for automated licenses to make the access easier, we are open to consider and move forward. And maybe for PMSE and in particular for events, it makes sense as well. But and now we are maybe to a similar point as for the white spaces. Up to now, we have a very easy solution on that one. PMSE is on a secondary basis. They can use every channel in the area and in the range which the regulator has defined before. So it is up to the user to decide which channel is available and maybe use. If we use then a database system, the regulator or the database system is deciding on the channel. And this is no longer under the control of the expert directly at the event. And that may create more difficulties in the future. So from the regulatory aspect, the easier part is really to leave it then to the most sophisticated system. And by the way, in Germany, it won't stop at 694. We have still capable channels for PMSE in the upper part, in particular in the center gaps of 700, 800. And I know a lot of hospitalities and schools which are using exactly that spectrum because of the quality of service. My colleague said before, they would like to use the easier access.
Okay. And what about 3.7, 3.8?
3.7, 3.8. Yeah, that's an issue right now. We are using a database system already at this stage in order to make this more easier and faster. Okay. However, we are also evaluating that. We are just discussing here very point-oriented, geographical, localized usage, which is not a nationwide usage. So that's a totally different system, and therefore we need to also ensure here an efficient use of the spectrum. And if you look on that one, it is already a success story because the verticals have also made a push to the 5G development from our perspective. However, in terms of efficient use of spectrum, there could be done more.
Charles, you wanted to react?
Yeah, just, getting back to CBRS itself, I think it's important to note that there are a lot of spectrum determination technologies, right? That the two main ones are the ones I mentioned earlier during my presentation, are the sensing, and then we also have some database / notification. And as a spectrum manager, spectrum regulator, I'm trying to always put myself out of the job. Not successful yet, but if you look at sensing, it's beautiful, right? Because at CBR sensing, there is no human in the middle. The sensor determines it, and automatically it flows through and turns on the devices. Again, it's beautiful. You only need to monitor it, and from a spectrum management, we don't have to put resources in, right? Particularly if it's run by an external company. For scheduling, then it requires resources for us, at least within the U.S. as us as spectrum managers or regulators. So we have to make sure the database is accurate before you have the incumbent systems. That requires a lot of work, right? That's not a simple process. So it's something to think in mind as we're considering the ways to determine if an incumbent is using the spectrum, either sensing or database. Certainly one cannot be used all the time, but I would just encourage to look at all the possible mechanisms for that.
Let James react, and then I'll move to another topic.
I don't want to be too. I'm going to be critical, I'm afraid, of CBRS. One of the benefits of CBRS was it enables the US Navy to hide where their warships are and their use, and I really support that. I think it's a great idea because generally we don't want people knowing where we're operating, what frequencies, all that kind of stuff. Sure. And so it's a really good proof of concept, but I think unfortunately what's been missed is the database of it's like the IDs of ships. It's for like safety of life, and all the ships operating everywhere in the world have this database. Your little beacon says, "Here I am." US Navy has it switched on. We know where all their warships are, so you could actually instead of having this 100-kilometer squares that you protect because the warship might be in there, you want to have that vagary of where it is. It's known. Everybody, unfortunately, knows where it is.
You can see those ships, correct?
You can see- and the bad guys could see where the US Navy are.
You know, I can't speak, but I thought I've heard before that that's optional in terms of military uses.
Yeah,
But
I
again,
think-
I'm getting out of my
So,
lane.
Yeah,
we all tend to have it switched on.
Yeah, I didn't want it to make, you know, a criticism or debate just about CPR, just a whole concept of using a database, but let me move. So James, so you mentioned that what, 80 to what?
85%.
85% of, you know, spectrum used by MOD is already being shared with. So what type of framework are you using, you know, to share spectrum? And can you give examples of some bands? I'm not very familiar.
I can't list
yeah.
the bands particularly, not because they're secret, but because I don't know them. I think I'd have to be there another 5 years before I'd know them. But what we do have is we have a number of arrangements. So we will share, for example, with UK Space Agency, not Space Agency, science, we will share with the astronomy people. So we would have an agreement where we will use this band, they will use it at, say, Cambridge, where they're doing radio astronomy, and we will protect within a 50-kilometer circle around Cambridge so that they don't get interference from our activities. So we have paper agreements with an awful lot of bands. What we're looking to do with the new framework that we're working on is have a much more granular, detailed agreement with Ofcom that says exactly what we're going to do. So right now we might not share spectrum near a certain location where we do some training in the UK because we might train there, but we probably only train there maybe 4 weeks of the year. We could probably share it for 48 weeks of the year. And when I say share it, we could probably allow them to just use it 48 weeks of the year. So it's different kinds of sharing. And as long as we can get an agreement with Ofcom that says to our seniors when they sign up to it, this is how you get it back if something changes. Or say, for example, we train in Salisbury Plain and they suddenly say to us, now you need to train in Scotland. We need to change on our sharing agreement. As long as we have an arrangement with Ofcom that's understood and the person we're sharing with knows the terms they're sharing with, then we could change it. And I think as long as everyone's got the surety, then you can do more.
Thank you, James. I heard that, you know, I think all of you support sharing to some extent. So all the days of clearing spectrum and auctioning or giving spectrum from a mobile industry or licensing to mobile industry, all these days gone. Like, you know, we talk about sharing, you know, by design, correct, for 6G, but I'm not aware of like 3GPP working on like, you know, including features or technologies into 6G, but we are sharing with radars or some of the non-3GPP technologies. And maybe I'm wrong when, you know, I let if the people in the room from mobile industry can react to that. So yeah, please.
Moorut, I don't like the point of clearing up the spectrum. I don't see that the time of the auctions is over either. The auction is something to overcome the scarcity because we have much less spectrum available for the number of people or companies who would like to use the spectrum, and therefore the auction is the measure to see who gets what. But to be clear on that one, and we just heard as well that the PMSE industry is looking for clear spectrum as well. Therefore, we have to work maybe technically more on the point, where is the spectrum clear? Under which circumstances? That is then the question, because you would like to expect that you have a certain quality of service. And that is then maybe the case where we can work on and say, okay, in this geographical area, you can use that and others as well. But that requires then, like James said, that we get as the regulator the right information. And we have not only the problem that the PMSE equipment is moving all around the globe, also some other equipment is moving all around the globe.
So you talk about this and then I'll help.
I think I totally agree with Alex. I think as regulators, we need to have the full toolkit. We always talk about the spectrum toolkit because there may be circumstances in which you run an award, but I'm not closing completely the option of nationwide networks. But at the moment, given the spectrum that is under consideration, you need to look at where the demand is and how you make it available. So what we're doing with 26 gigahertz is exactly that. We have made it available through an award where we believe there is excess demand because these are the high density area. Everywhere else, we don't need an award because we don't expect it to be excess demand. So again, having visibility to use an award, to use a different authorization approach, to potentially make it available on a shared basis, it's what we need going forward, because yes, different problems need different solutions.
You know, just to bounce back on that one. So Alexander, you talk about, you know, military, I think, exploring maybe TVUHF band, correct? 470, I think I've read it somewhere that military is interested in maybe lower part, 500 megahertz, correct? And maybe they'll use it in, I don't know, for training at military base, and then PMSC can use it outside. Is that concept, can that concept be used also for 5G IMT? Like, I think Tomo talked about the West End here, where PMSC usage, I mean, the UK, where you have PMSC usage, you know, at a high level on a like daily basis. Can we envisage a case where, for example, when you're going to look at potentially giving part of that band 470 to 694 megahertz, hopefully, you know, never, but if that happens in 15 years, if that happens in 15 years or 20 years after I retire or something, can you look at options where you don't allow IMT or 5G in the West End, in the UK, where you have a lot of PMSC usage, and put IMT base stations outside? Is that something that could also be explored, where you will actually restrict use of IMT and 5G in certain locations, just like you're looking for military?
It would be in the toolbox, like Cristina said. But we would better have then maybe a safe harbor for the usage in the West End, to say something around that, and have then the possibility of a nationwide usage in another band. But if we see it right now for the IMT community, and the development we see is that we see maybe some more capacity-oriented usage, and that maybe not lead to restrictions, but maybe to less usage in maybe certain times, certain areas, or something like that, where it may be more sustainable that the mobile networks are decreasing their usage in the West End, when everybody is sitting there and enjoying the show instead of using their mobiles. So they will clearly decrease the base station usage. But on the other side, in other situations, maybe stadiums or something like that, where we have a similar situation with PMSE, that there everybody would like to have this immersive usage, and there we need then maybe also both networks in place. So we have definitely a more capacity-oriented world where which we need to balance, and that is something which is really the challenge for spectrum management in the future. And the Olympics are exactly the best example for that.
Yeah, just switching to 6G, correct? You know, some of the bands being considered, obviously the upper 6 gigahertz band, and also the 7 and 8. You mentioned 7 and 8 as part of a national spectrum strategy. You know, Emmanuel, maybe, I don't know, any views on 7 and 8 ever happening in Europe? It's a NATO band. I know Alexander's view. I didn't want to hear that word. Oh.
French military are very
Not
good at
influenced
that.
by James or by Alexander.
Well, actually, coming back to the general debate and argumentation about sharing when it is relevant or not. So sometimes I fear of being unattractive when we talk about sharing, but I'm quite in line with Alexander when he refers to sharing, which is a normal practice to a great extent in many bands. Then, of course, the topic is very often is what kind of enhanced sharing solutions may be needed and so on. But in reality, what is clear to us is that the sharing should always be envisaged on a case-by-case basis. You need to understand the constraints of incumbent services. In some cases, depending on the demands to be met, the clearing may be desirable, but it's not, doesn't mean necessarily clearing all the users. There are example of sharing between terrestrial and satellite services. We can talk about this when, with respect to the 6 gigahertz band, but what I mean is, yes, it's important to always keep in mind the importance of looking on the case-by-case basis. And I would add, in terms of general, it's not so much a strategy, but it's true that within ANFR, we do value a lot frequency harmonization, especially in the European context. It's to a great extent, that's what industry demands to get successful results. So, with respect to PMSE, I mentioned the 2.7 to 2.9 gigahertz band. Actually, it was a long road to get to this. We have supported this to work at CPT level, necessary studies up to the point where it could be incorporated into the recommendation 2510 that you know. So this kind of thing takes time. We don't necessarily have to implement a very complex tool to authorize this. Harmonization.
Yes,
is
on
key
278.
I wanted also to talk about things. Well, yeah, our position is definitely that it's not an option for
No.
at least from a French perspective. Certainly, we had a position during WRC, and we still have the same assessment of the situation. Not only because of NATO usage, but we certainly do regret that the proposal went through. But the topic is also to be connected with the discussion on the upper 6 gigahertz bands. I'll come back later on this if you.
Yeah,
if
I mean,
you
right,
want,
you
but,
can do it now. So, you talk about harmonization, correct? And you like this. So would like the Ofcom framework, that's something that ANFR would be willing to adopt?
Well, obviously, the upper 6 gigahertz band is the most contentious frequency management topic in our days. We certainly, within CPT, we do confront a number of views and different studies. It's a difficult path. It has been difficult for many years. It will continue to be so. Cristina referred to sharing by design in this case. We admit that we do not look at the topic from the same angle. We in this case we don't see sharing as a goal. Spectrum management. Spectrum sharing is certainly a means, a necessary means in many instances to accommodate a solution. In other words, at the top level of spectrum policy, we need to identify which frequency bands for which services to be, or which innovative services to be developed. And in this very difficult upper 6 gigahertz band, we obviously we have a difficult situation, and that's at least our reading of the current studies that are shared within CPT, is that you cannot envisage sharing between the mobile network in this band and with Wi-Fi without reducing significantly the power of the base station. So this has quite significant consequence, and I understand that there are some figures. I think there are lots of interesting figures that are coming out of the discussion today in CPT and at EU level. I understand that with a 20 dB reduction of the power, you would get compared to the conventional micro base station power, you would get a 30% decrease of the in terms of capacity. And you also obviously have the impact on the indoor coverage. Some are arguing that well, it's more. It would be better if indoor connectivity is achieved through Wi-Fi, but it's not as simple as that. And maybe my last point on this, I understand, and that's probably certainly a figure provided by the mobile industries that nowadays, if I'm correct, 70% of the MNO traffic is generated with terminals which are located indoor. One may believe it's inefficient, but it's a situation today. And and there are no obvious trends that this figure, this ratio, would diminish in the future. So that's the kind of elements we have to have in mind when we look at this topic, and also last point, it relates to the concept of primary bands. Do we need primary bands for 6G? It's a question placed to the stakeholders. But it's true that again, in our assessment, and that's why I will make the link with the 7-8 GHz band. It is true that our assessment is that only the upper 6 GHz band would be a usable solution for primary or new bands for 6G.
So, Charles, 7 and 8 are being studied, and US doesn't have 6 gigahertz of an option, correct, for 6G. I mean, it's being used for Wi-Fi 6, and even part of 7 gigahertz is being explored perhaps for Wi-Fi extension. And I think tomorrow we're going to hear Josh from HP talk about Wi-Fi, etc. So what's the likelihood of 7 and 8 becoming a band that could be used for 6G?
You know, from the US, it's completely an unknown. As I mentioned during my presentation, it's being studied. We've got 2 years to do that. There is money being released to the federal agencies for them to assess it, but really, it's just a question mark. No decision is even being contemplated.
Okay, and you know, I'll finish with just a question on PMSC. I think you know, mentioned the DME band in the UK. I don't know, Cristina and Laura, if you can, you know, maybe provide some additional insights in terms of how this band is being used for PMSC and how successful it has been. I think Jomo mentioned it. And then the follow-up question would be for, you know, ANFR and then BNetzA, you know, are you willing to explore opening the 960 megahertz, for example, for Germany? Obviously, we need probably to do that across CPT, just you know, for 1 or 2 countries, and perhaps even the 1240 to 1260, you know, megahertz band, for example, like what was used for the Olympic Games, just one event. So, any maybe
I don't have specific statistics on the usage of a DME band, but I would definitely sort of repeat what Martin was saying. We did our analysis, we presented our studies, we proposed this band because we are still convinced that these are very
no
good
issues
alternatives.
whatsoever with. But the incumbent. Anything to add, Laura? Or?
I think, I mean, from government perspective, we're not really close to the technical details of it, but what I can say, and I'm going to put like the political hat on, is that moving forward, let's say the way that the UK industries, creative industries has in providing wealth to the country, we foresee that PMSC will kind of be quite critical in identifying spectrum that is needed, is required for their needs, whether it's in band or in others, or in the way they access the band, or you access the band, is within the mix. But we think like we're kind of getting close to a point where we need to reassess whether that is fit for purpose still.
Alexander and Emmanuel, you know, this 960 megahertz, is that something?
I said it already that we will definitely evaluate if there are any opportunities in that direction, and definitely after hearing that today with the experience here, maybe we have to look into the DME band again. But I would like also to say that that can be done also with the same kind of regulatory environment on a secondary basis, where we have a clear priority of the primary user, which may also require that certain channels may not be available. So that's the same thing like for Ofcom. We have to make up our homework on that one, and obviously that may take a little bit pressure off the UHF band, which is then beneficial for other coverage applications.
Exactly. And Emmanuel?
Oh, I cannot make any progress. It's a bit delicate for me. I was involved in the discussion with John Vaughn. Is connected, and it's true that we did contribute a lot to highlighting the risk and the perceived risk and difficulties in terms of spectrum, the risk associated with the potential use of PMSC in the DME band. The concept was interesting. It's about using some sort of DME white space so somehow, but there were also the lots of challenges in terms of enforcement, the difficulty. Well, there were arguments referring to the nature of the specificities of the PMSE sectors and the difficulty maybe to import some restrictions in this sensitive band, and also the nature of the incumbent system, which are very often by frequency systems and so on. So it's a difficult topic.
James, please.
It's worth mentioning that when the DME band was released by Ofcom for PMSE, I was at DCMS at the time, and we had representations from PMSE industry complaining about it, saying that Ofcom are giving us the wrong band. This is absolutely useless. We won't be able to do anything in it. There's no equipment.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased to see Ofcom proved right.
Well, I think, can I just jump in on that? Because I think it wasn't so much, it wasn't so much, I think, that it was the wrong spectrum. It was the fact that there are limitations to it because it wasn't harmonized in any way. So it was UK only, which meant that manufacturers weren't in a position to guarantee to make equipment. That's an important caveat.
Yeah.
Not that it was the wrong spectrum. It was spectrum that is gratefully received, and for the relatively small number of people that use it very successfully, it's actually responsible for a very, very wide amount of TV programs that we all watch. Well, not all of us, but lots of people watch every Saturday night, every Friday night. So there's a disparity in what is perceived as successful use of spectrum versus the economic value of what it tries through the creative industries for TV viewing. Because certainly, if you look at Elstree, as Tomo said, it isn't possible to do what goes on at Elstree without having used it.
Yeah.
Even though there have been improvements in spectral efficiency from manufacturers along the way.
And television centres.
It's absolutely critical to that location. That's not necessarily true of every location, but that doesn't make it not valuable and well received new area of spectrum.
So what I was trying to get to is now that we have an ecosystem, correct? Our equipment have experience in the UK, then looks like at least Germany and perhaps France would be willing to help support the expansion. We need to go to CPT. I think that could be an action item for us, correct? Is go to CPT and try to put that ban across all of Europe based on having an ecosystem and having the UK experience. And then Charles, as I said, this I think Tom also mentioned, and I think Emmanuel, the 1240 to 1260 megahertz band, even John, for that was used at Paris Olympic Games, is band that we use, PMSE users in Japan, and you use it in France, especially for the Japan. Yeah, I don't think there was any issue. I think that's another option, I guess, we would want to build on, hopefully, across all of Europe, but also I mentioned to you in the US. But I think you said in US there are some additional challenges, correct?
Right. But this is also where I can say, this is more in the lane of the other regulator in the FCC. I would gladly work.
Okay, that's good. Any questions from the audience before we break for just networking, drinks and any? Yeah, please.
Cristina, you mentioned the number of years of 3.8 to 4.2 being available for low and medium power networks, and that's been very encouraging and very welcomed. And the number of consultations, I've a lot of consultations to respond to relating to relaxing the sharing, and that's been very, very beneficial as well. We talked about speeding up access to the band, but it's been very clear and has been detailed in that you are not making it available for what you call pop-up networks. And we deem that to be PMSE applications of a few days hence. I mean, PMSE applications can be made instantly online through a website that predated Ofcom and a process. So that hasn't really been addressed in terms of PMSE. And also, you're allowing a high power 5G nationwide network in the middle of the band for H3G. Which you've just consulted on out-of-band emissions, which are 49 dB higher than the previous service. And those will be out-of-band emissions across the entire band. Your colleagues tell me that there'll be no impact on spectrum availability, but they won't share their workings with us. So it's very difficult to assess that. When it comes to MOD sharing, I've talked to Ian many times, and Ian is very helpful. And in the technical terms, it's all very positive, and the fact that you've got Ofcom people embedded in there works very well, and Landfill have been very helpful. But it does tend to fall down when it comes back to the actual licensing of it, which is Ofcom's duty. And that is what really needs attention, because my impression is that MOD are swift and are willing, and where they can.
Swift, but we are winning. We are winning. Ofcom.
So it's that's what needs to be addressed, I think, going forwards. I think 3.8, 4.2, you're giving mixed messages from Ofcom.
So we've heard the desire for a pop-up solution and sort of speed up access to pop-up solution. So we will consider how we could potentially do something about it. It's something that we're listening to industry and what industry is telling us with regards to so. Bear with us as we're still in sort of consultation clause, but we haven't yet published our statement. And something that I haven't mentioned is that so we know that this band may require a lot of ongoing management. It's just that we've put in place certain changes. We want to see the effect of those changes and then consider potentially making additional improvement. But we've heard loud and clear the need to sort of speedy turnaround and short-term licensing.
Short notice.
Yeah. So the speedy turnaround is you ask, you want the day after. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Cristina.
You were waiting very patiently, so if you did.
I did have a question at this time, yes. So it's about the upper 6 gigahertz, and it maybe primarily targeted at Cristina, but maybe also the other regulators here. I guess to understand, the point is, I think it's important to understand whether IMT or Wi-Fi or both need to use the upper 6 gigahertz to meet specific connectivity targets. Because without knowing that information, it's hard to tell whether sharing actually provides net benefits compared to when either one or the other is using the band. My question is, in Europe, do we have connectivity targets in terms of, for example, data rates for mobile broadband outdoor or for broadband indoor, so that then we can assess whether IMT or Wi-Fi can actually need access to the band, or are existing bands sufficient to deliver those connectivity targets? And if we have we done these studies among the regulators, and if not, are there plans to do this in Europe? Because at the moment, it seems like for some administrations, the starting point is there's going to be sharing, and I'm missing the logic from individual use of the band by the two technologies to sharing being the net benefit option.
So the thing that I can say is that we've done studies both assess the Wi-Fi demand, and that's how we have released the lower 6 gigahertz spectrum to start with. I think it was pre-COVID. Oh, no, actually during COVID, 2019, 2020, we made it available. Laura and I actually worked together on that one. So we assessed the idea of what is the fiber going into the home and how much Wi-Fi you will need to actually make sure that the Wi-Fi is not a bottleneck to your gigabit connectivity that the government is trying to deliver in the UK. At the same time, 2 years ago, we published, and again, Laura and I were working together on that, our assessment of mobile spectrum demand. And whilst we recognize that some spectrum in some circumstances, and I'm going back to what Alex was saying with regards to there may be some capacity crunch somewhere, but our assessment was that with a growth in demand from mobile along the lines of the 20%, which is, I think, 20-25% is what we're seeing across Europe. I think Finland actually is down to 5% year-on-year growth. Our assessment was MNO should be able to deploy all of the spectrum they have. They could densify. So it may be that the demand for spectrum is localized rather than everywhere. So this is what is driving our assessment of making the spectrum available in a hybrid way could actually deliver a lot of benefit from the indoor use and for the outdoor use of mobile. I'm going back to what my colleague from ANFR was saying earlier. I appreciate that maybe mobile needs to lower the power, but it's also mobile is trying to increase significantly the power compared to 3.5 to actually match the cell size of 3.5 and achieve your indoor penetration. Is that the most efficient, sustainable way going forward? I don't know. We're trying to sort of say, well, the outdoor in model at some point may not work, and you need to develop a model that is indoor in, and whether it's Wi-Fi or it's a different type of femtocell at an enterprise environment. What's the right thing?
All those answers could be very well, much better addressed if there are targets. The target could be indoor. We would like in the UK to have 1 gigabits per second connectivity. Outdoor, we would like around 200 megabits per second connectivity. And if you, sorry, please.
Yeah, please. And I want to make sure we get, is there any questions?
One question online.
But yeah, Laura can add.
Just to add that I think you can find a target setting up the minimum we expect people to enjoy at home, but it's really difficult to put a maximum or a kind of expected area. But we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know how services are going to deploy. 10 years ago, it was really difficult to have foreseen 40% year-on-year growth for 4G. It is a similar, I think it's a very similar case. What the difference now that uncertainty both applies to mobile and Wi-Fi. So I think, and again with my Ofcom hat on, I think the fundamental point of exploring hybrid is a way that there are going to be some form of like trade-offs between the two, and ways in where networks are going to look different. But all in all, are going to be able to achieve something that customers are going to enjoy, like the parts of the Zoom are buried on the synthesis, but the greater, you're going to actually achieve greater benefits from having the two.
Martin, any?
Yeah, sorry, this might have been from before. So it was from Daniel Hamaday, who's at Motorola. So apologies, Daniel, I've just picked up your question. Question to Ofcom, Cristina, and it's a bit of a mouthful, so bear with me. What is the background for deciding to shut down 26 gigahertz fixed links completely when the idea for sharing with spectrum is being promoted in this band and across other bands? Is the understanding that only 3GPP-based mobile broadband technologies can share the band and not other users or radio interfaces or services? Or is the priority for mobile broadband ruling over the decisions?
So I think the approach for 26 gigahertz is to deliver, to award it in high density area. So we had to clear everything in high density area. Everywhere else, it's a first come, first serve, technology neutral, as long as it fits with the technical rules that we're setting. So we're trying again to allow different type of users potentially or uses in the band going forward in any case.
Don't forget, we've got a slice there.
Yes.
We have a slice of nationwide spectrum. MOD had 26.5 to 27.5 and exchanged it with Ofcom for a slice at the bottom of the band, but nationwide. But this is a good example of where Ofcom's changed approach to this licensing has given a benefit, because we gave up 1 gigahertz of national coverage for 200 megahertz, knowing that in the locations we operate, we can now flex to 3.25 gigahertz if nobody else is going to use it. And the chances are where we operate, nobody's going to be operating.
Yeah. So, I would like to thank Cristina, Laura, James, Alexander, Neil, and Charles for this engaging, discussion. And we can continue the discussion actually afterwards. So, drink drinks. Hopefully, you can relax. Maybe you don't discuss something more. Anyway, thank you again for coming. And then, looking forward to working with you on sharing. Looks like there's a consensus that sharing is going to become more and more predominant. And then And then when it comes to the PMS industry, it looks like there's also some couple of options with the DME band, with 40 to 16 of all. Thank you, and session is closed.